In the golden age of Greece, when philosophers shaped wisdom and empires clashed for power, a child was born who would one day command the known world. His name was Alexander, son of Philip of Macedon and Olympias, a boy destined not just for greatness, but for immortality. Trained under the wisdom of Aristotle, Alexander's mind was sharpened with philosophy, science, and strategy, while his heart burned with unshakable ambition. From the very beginning, the young prince knew he was not like others. His destiny was to conquer, to expand, and to leave behind a name that would echo across the centuries. This is the story of a man who became a myth, a leader who became a legend, and a conqueror who became eternal. This is the saga of Alexander the Great. Before Alexander took the world, his father Philip II forged the weapon that would conquer it, the Macedonian army. With its formidable phalanx formation, discipline, and innovation, Philip transformed Macedonia from a small kingdom into a rising power. Alexander watched closely, learning the art of war not in books, but on the battlefield. He rode beside his father, absorbing every detail of strategy, every whisper of politics, every lesson of power. Yet fate is cruel. Philip was assassinated, leaving the young Alexander at only 20 years of age to inherit the throne. Many believed he was too young, too inexperienced, too untested. But Alexander would silence them all, not with words, but with victory. No sooner had he claimed the throne than rebellion erupted across Greece. City-states rose, testing the will of the boy king. But Alexander's response was swift, merciless, and decisive. In a matter of weeks, he crushed uprisings, burned Thebes to the ground, and reasserted Macedonian dominance. The message was clear: defy Alexander and face destruction. Now Greece was united, and Alexander turned his gaze eastward to the mighty Persian Empire, a land of immeasurable wealth, endless armies, and kings who claimed to be gods. Where others saw an impossible challenge, Alexander saw his destiny. The world was waiting to be conquered, and Alexander was ready to seize it. With Greece united under his command, Alexander turned to the east, the Persian Empire, the greatest power of its time. At the shores of the Hellespont, he performed a sacred ritual, casting a spear into Persian soil, declaring it won by right of conquest. His army, just 30,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry, faced the might of Persia, whose forces outnumbered them many times over. Yet Alexander carried not just weapons, but vision. As they marched through Asia Minor, he inspired his men with speeches that burned with conviction. They were not merely soldiers, they were immortals in the making. At the Granicus River, Alexander himself led the charge, fearless, his golden helmet catching the sun, cutting through Persian lines like a storm. Victory was swift. The legend of Alexander had truly begun. 2 years into the campaign, Alexander faced King Darius III of Persia at Issus. The Persian army stretched across miles, outnumbering the Macedonians almost 5-1. But Alexander's genius was not in numbers. It was in strategy. With the phalanx anchoring the center and his cavalry forming a hammer on the right, he saw the weak point and struck like lightning. Riding at the head of his companions, Alexander shattered the Persian lines and charged directly at Darius himself. The great king fled in panic, abandoning his family and treasure. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. The Persians were no longer invincible. The world began to whisper a new name: the name of the conqueror who humbled kings, Alexander. After Issus, Alexander marched south, liberating cities that welcomed him as a hero. In Egypt, oppressed under Persian rule, he was embraced as a liberator. The priests of Amun declared him the son of Zeus, cementing his divine aura. At the mouth of the Nile, he founded a city that would become one of the greatest in history, Alexandria, the beacon of culture, trade, and knowledge. Standing before the pyramids, he declared that deeds of men, no matter how great, must be remembered by the world. Alexander's conquest was no longer just about territory. It was about legacy. He sought to carve his name not only into lands, but into time itself. Then came the decisive moment, the Battle of Gaugamela. Darius assembled an army so vast it seemed to stretch to the horizon. War elephants, scythed chariots, cavalry beyond number. Yet Alexander, with discipline and brilliance, turned the tide. He refused to fight where Darius had chosen, maneuvering until the ground favored his phalanx. When the moment came, he led the companion cavalry in a thunderous charge straight at the heart of the Persian army. Once again, Darius fled, his empire collapsing in his shadow. With this victory, Alexander was not just a king, he was the master of Asia. The Persian Empire, once thought eternal, crumbled before him. As he entered the royal palaces of Persia, Alexander stood among treasures beyond imagination, gold, jewels, and thrones of kings long dead. Yet he did not merely plunder, he sought to rule. In Persepolis, he ordered the burning of the palace of Xerxes, a symbolic act that declared the end of Persian power. But Alexander was more than a conqueror. He dreamed of unity. He began adopting Persian customs, clothing, and even married into their nobility. Some of his men questioned him, but Alexander's vision was clear. Not Greece, not Persia, but one world, one empire, one destiny under his command. Still unsatisfied, Alexander turned his gaze to the farthest reaches of the known world. Through deserts and mountains, he marched into Central Asia, crushing resistance, founding new cities, spreading Greek culture blended with the traditions of the lands he conquered. But the further he marched, the more resistance grew, not only from enemies, but from his own men. They had followed him thousands of miles, but now they longed for home. Alexander's dream was vast, limitless, but even he could not escape the limits of human endurance. Yet his determination was unshaken. He would not stop until he reached the edge of the world itself. At last, Alexander crossed into India, a land of wonders and challenges unknown. Here he faced King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes. Porus's war elephants thundered across the battlefield, a terrifying sight even to veterans. But Alexander, as always, adapted. Using feints and ambushes, he turned the elephants into chaos, and after fierce combat, Porus was defeated. Yet Alexander, impressed by his courage, restored him to power, proving that he could conquer not only with the sword, but with respect. Still, as the rain poured endlessly and jungles closed in, his army refused to march further. For the first time, Alexander's dream was halted, not by an enemy, but by the will of his own men. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back, leading his weary men through deserts of unimaginable suffering. Thousands perished, yet he marched on, determined to return not as a retreating king, but as a ruler of an empire united. In Babylon, he planned new conquests to Arabia, perhaps even beyond the known world. But fate had other plans. In the prime of his life, at just 32 years old, Alexander fell ill. Within days, the conqueror of the world lay on his deathbed, surrounded by generals who asked the question that haunts history: "To whom do you leave your empire?" His answer was simple, yet shattering: "To the strongest." And with those words, the dream of Alexander passed into legend. Though his life was short, Alexander's impact was eternal. In just over a decade, he carved an empire stretching from Greece to India. He spread Greek culture, founded cities, and inspired generations. His empire did not survive him, yet his legacy endured. In philosophy, in science, in art, in the idea that the world could be united under one vision. Even today, more than 2,000 years later, his name is whispered with awe. He was not merely a man. He was a force of history, a storm given flesh, a dream made real. And as long as stories are told, Alexander the Great will never truly die. For legends, unlike men, are eternal.